In this video, we're going to talk about drum emulator software as opposed to one-shot samples for finger drumming. Now, this is a topic that a lot of people ask me about because I always recommend using a drum software. And a lot of people know, can I just use my one-shot samples? I have a really cool one-shot kit. Can I just play finger drums like that? Maybe that's how they've been doing it. Maybe that's how they've seen, hip hop producers or beat makers, playing on their pad controllers with the one-shots, and they sound really cool. Definitely not knocking that. There's nothing against that. But for realistic drum kit style finger drumming, we don't want to be using one-shots. So the reason is when a drummer is playing a drum kit, the physics of acoustics are at work. So imagine a snare drum in front of you and the drummer hits the snare drum with a drumstick. Now that creates a vibration, a reverberation. The hit reverberates through the drum shell and it makes a sound, right? That's basically a one shot. You've taken a recording of that and you've sampled it. However, when the drummer hits the drum a second time with the drumstick, the hit is not going to be exactly the same acoustically. It's going to sound a little different just because of physics. He's hitting at a slightly different spot on the drum head. The reverberations are moving a little bit differently. And so it's a different sound. It's only slightly different, but the human ear can tell if you listen to a bunch of snare drum hits in a row, if they're all a repeat of the same exact sample, or if it's an actual snare drum being played, because you hear a slight, tiny, minute difference in each hit. And then on top of that, if an acoustic drummer hits the snare drum and then immediately after, before the reverberations have died down, if he hits it again, now there are two sets of reverberations interfering with each other. It's literally like if you're on a flat, still pond and you throw a rock in, it makes a set of ripples. And before those ripples have died down, if you throw another rock in, it makes another set of ripples, and then those ripples interfere with each other and they create something called an interference pattern. Now that's how acoustics are actually working inside of a drum. If you're playing a bunch of drum hits in succession, not only are they different hits on their own, but when they combine together acoustically, being played almost at the same time, you're getting a completely different sound than you would if you just took one single one-shot sample and sampled it and played it a bunch of times in succession. So this is what one-shot samples cannot give you. They cannot give you a realistic drum sound. However, drum emulator software can give you a realistic drum sound because it's a software that's been designed to emulate and to model the real way that drums are played. So they use different techniques and different methods to achieve this. One of the techniques is multi-sampling, which that simply means that they go into a studio and they record a drummer hitting a snare drum, but they record one hit for every single velocity layer. So they're recording really soft hits all the way up, literally 100 of them or more, up to the hardest hit on just one drum. So that's just for the dynamics. So you're getting really soft hits up to really hard hits, and they're all gonna sound a little bit different instead of just taking one, medium hard hit and like turning the volume down to make it softer or turning the volume up to make it harder. That's not gonna sound realistic either. In addition to multi-sampling, they do what's called round robin sampling, which means that even if I'm playing at one velocity, let's say every single hit I do is at 120 velocity, they also have multiple different hits recorded at that velocity because, like I said, every single hit of the drum, even if it's at the same force, it's still gonna sound different because it's at a different place on the drum head. So they have multiple samples, different samples for each velocity layer. So it's multi-sampled and it's round robin sampled, and they cycle through those as you are playing, even at the same velocity. So you're getting a lot of realistic range and dynamic sound to your drumming when you play with a drum emulator software. The fact is, for simple beat making or tapping out patterns, or for working on like a traditional hip hop style beat within the context of a track that you're producing, using one-shot samples is totally fine because you can get some really interesting and crunchy and distorted sort of drum sounds that you wouldn't get out of an actual acoustic drum kit. But for us, for our purposes, we at Dragon Finger Drums are teaching you real finger drumming. We're teaching you how to play drums with your fingers on the pad controller. This is a real musical instrument for us, and if we want to get the maximum quality and realistic sound as a musical percussion instrument out of this, then we want to use a drum emulator software.